When you're creating a department's scoreboard, what's sort of the framework there to discover what are the sort of key values of that scoreboard and how we're going to measure success for the upcoming season?
Really big believer in the power of co-design. We need to try to involve them in the conversation if we can around what do they think that scoreboard should show and what are the things that might contribute towards that scoreboard coming to life. So once you've had the conversation around all of the different possible combinations, it's then deciding, okay, well, what are we going after here? What is that simple scoreboard that represents where we need to get to? I was over in Paris recently, late last year, as part of the Rugby World Cup, and I was reading a book about Leonardo da Vinci, of all people. And there was a quote of da Vinci's, which was, "Simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication." And I really like that because, particularly in AFL, is that the great leaders, I think the great coaches are the ones that are able to take the complex and make it simple.
What do the coaches perceive as what's success for the high performance department? Is that sort of, and then you would obviously have your own internal conversation, and then you bring all the information together and ultimately create your scoreboard for the year on what success looks like?
You see it all the time where in different sports around the world where a team will go through a sustained period of poor performance and then all of a sudden they'll do a review. I've always been at the belief that you should be actually reviewing what you do in good times and bad. But when you develop a high performance program, you should also develop a process for a review. And that process for review should include at least quarterly checkpoints across the whole department where people come together and sort of talk about, are we on track or are we not on track? When you've created what you think the framework for success is, it's one page, like plan on a page. Well, what does that look like? All the different departments. And then what you can do with that template is you can actually hand it out to each of the different groups that are involved in your program and get them to rate what they think that we currently are in that area. You can choose what rating system you use. I sort of feel like the old 0 to 10 works quite well, 0 being poor, 10 being excellent, and get them to put a number against it. And then just to write down 2 or 3 things that they think they can do to take you from what you currently rated to what you could be rated potentially.
Are you sort of hoping when you're running that sort of activity that there'll be differing opinions when there is change that's ultimately wanting to happen?
Yeah, I think it's good to have a mix of both. Like tension is just so necessary in high performance. And I think it's necessary in any kind of culture. It's if you want progress. What's the quote? I think it was Frederick Douglass said something along the lines of there can be no progress without discomfort or something along those lines. And I think that those conversations, whilst they could be difficult, they're so necessary. And then it's, well, do we have a safe environment? If we pride ourselves on creating a culture where people can belong, where there's kind of safety and openness in and around the opinions that we can share with one another, and there's a healthy level of challenge as well too. It sort of shouldn't be about the org chart and where you are positioned in the hierarchy. I don't think you have to be abrasive. I think you can actually try to be as constructive as possible with those conversations and identify what's the best way for me to have that conversation in order for it to have the greatest impact.
Perhaps their pre-game speech with their peers or whatever it might be to inspire their teammates or build that connection. What are some practical tips for developing leaders to bring storytelling into their presentation skills, I guess?
I think do a lot of work with coaches and encourage coaches and leaders to become story factories. I feel like stories are the fabric of humankind. They're what brings us together. And you can have all the statistics and the facts and figures and data in the world. The most powerful person in the world is a storyteller. Well, I might have some complex information to communicate, or I need to get a group from point A to point B. One of the best ways you can do that is through stories. One of the best places to start is the story of yourself as an individual, because when we come together in a team environment, every individual has a story, learning about what makes people tick, learning about what buttons to push or not push. I feel like the most important thing with stories is that you're just authentic and you don't try to be perfect and you don't try to be someone else. You don't have to be a great orator. You don't have to be a great war general. The best thing you can do is just be yourself.
Collaboration and connection, if that's raised as an area that a club has identified is something that's perhaps on that rating system that the coaches, the players, performance staff, medical, everyone's identified that as an area of growth. What are some common methods that you've used or principles that you like that are quite effective in that space?
Yeah, well, again, I don't think there's any off the shelf for that. It's really some things that work really well with one group or one team or one group of staff or players it doesn't work with another group of staff or players. I think it's really important is just trying different things. So don't be afraid to experiment. If something works, I think you do more of it potentially. And if something doesn't work, don't be afraid to just can it and move on to something else. That doesn't mean it's a failure. I think you sort of learn from the things that don't work as much as you learn from the things that do.